Okay, so hey guys and welcome back to another predictions video. In today's video I'm going to be predicting the Muhammad versus Edwards rematch, and so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Edwards is 22-3 with 7 KOs and 3 submissions, and Muhammad is 23-3 with 5 KOs and 1 submission. This fight is for the UFC welterweight title. Edwards' last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Covington, and Muhammad's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Burns. This is in Edwards' home country of England. Their first fight had ended in a no contest due to an eye poke in 2021. Edwards is a southpaw. Edwards is 32 and Muhammad is 36. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I've mentioned, UFC welterweight title 9, Edwards defending it yet again after, winning it very, very impressively the first time against Usman, then going on to fight Usman again, then fighting Covington, winning convincingly against Covington, and maybe even showing Covington out to be lesser of a fighter than what he is, and showing that perhaps he's past his best and things like that, where in a build up in which Covington was saying stuff which could have riled up a lot of fighters, and a lot of people were expecting Edwards to fight with that emotion and to just come in all guns blazing and to not really care too much about defense because he was just fueled off pure anger. But he didn't have that. He stood very disciplined, very calm, and composed after all that Covington was trying to get in his head by saying, and so that's full credit to not being able to get phased by anything. But Muhammad, he's been wanting this rematch for a long time now and been really trying to get himself in a position to be a contender for the title, and he's been waiting around for a while for this opportunity and hasn't really been the most active in recent years. I mean, he fought twice in 2022, which was good. He fought, I believe, twice in 2021 as well, which isn't bad. But only once in 2023 and hasn't fought yet in 2024. So I feel like he was in a position in which maybe similar to that of Sean Strickland at the moment, where he feels like he's more than deserving of a title shot, and he doesn't want to go in and fight one of the other contenders because he doesn't want to kind of risk that opportunity, in which, like I say, he is got himself in a position and he's worked hard to get in this position, and he's coming off an impressive victory against Burns and he's deserving of this title shot. And I do feel like it's about time, realistically, to see this rematch. Obviously, like I say, the first one in 2021, a lot's changed since then. Hopefully this one doesn't end in quite as bad a fashion. Of course, it's a rematch alongside another rematch on this card, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But in general, I think this is going to be the makings of a very good fight. Two strikers against each other. I say Edwards is a southpaw. They both switch stances quite a lot, which is another factor about them, which is going to make it interesting. Obviously, Muhammad being the older fighter is going to play an element, but Edwards also being at home, main eventing a huge pay-per-view event for England is going to be massive, and he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. And of course, we're going to have to wait and see how he handles that pressure. And like I say, also on this card, it's a great card. There's some excellent British fighters on there. I mean, of course, including the likes of Paddy Pimblett against Bobby Green, which I think is going to be an interesting contest, and Molly McCann on there, Makayev on there, who I'm a massive fan of. Then other fighters as well. I'm missing someone, but I forgot his name. But yeah, like I say, it's an excellent card. Molly McCann as well, and I do believe that it's great to see as a British person myself and a fan of MMA and a really big fan of these fighters who are building themselves in the UFC from England. It's just excellent to see them getting put on this platform and getting their credit, and yeah, it's just got a really big backing at the Co-op Arena. First, I believe, combat sports event at that Co-op Arena in Manchester. So I believe it might have sold out, I don't know, but if so, I think the crowd is going to be huge and they're going to be in for a treat, hopefully. Like I say, also on this card though, Aspinall versus Blades 2 for the interim UFC heavyweight title, which is a huge fight in itself, and this could be main event. Either of these two fights could be weighed up as a main event, and Aspinall on the run of his life and looking unstoppable against coming off the win against Pavlovich, where Pavlovich was knocking everybody out in the first round, looking unstoppable, and then Aspinall was the guy to knock him out and in the first round as well. And yeah, so he's looking so impressive. Of course, got this interim title. I respect him for taking Blades as a fight. I think he was in a position where he was getting to a point in which he could have just been waiting around for this title shot for uh, against Jones, but with things keeping seemingly getting maybe even worse for Jones with the whole maybe possible jail thing and things like that, it's good to see him not just waiting around. And there's also talks of him versus the likes of a Pereira as well. So if he gets through this fight, probably we'll see a huge fight for him next. But like I say, this is a tough fight in which he definitely shouldn't be underestimating. Blades coming off an impressive victory against Almeida, and I believe he lost before that, and that's why we didn't see the rematch earlier. But of course, the first fight ending in injury as well. But for Aspinall, and again, hopefully we don't see an injury like that again. But I believe that Aspinall will win via TKO in round 3. I think he's going to be able to show Blades for not being quite as fast and agile and athletic as Aspinall, and so in general, yeah, I think he's going to be able to get a mid-round stoppage and really kind of show himself that level above. And there are a lot of fighters in the UFC rankings, heavyweight wise, and even in boxing as well, in which they do maybe perhaps rely on their power a bit too much and their brute strength. And I think Aspinall just is this different kind of person in which he has that power, he has that strength, but at the same time he can fight so elegantly and so light-footed, and he's just such a well-rounded fighter. In which, in general, I think the accuracy as well. He's going to be able to get that stoppage, like I mentioned, in round 3, and then. Like I say, it'll be interesting to see who he can go on to fight next. But going back to the main event, Edwards, as a fighter, in general, he's, I think, an underrated champion. Obviously, on paper, some of his fights aren't always the most interesting and things like that, but I wouldn't say particularly they're not interesting. I mean, a lot of them have factors in which make them interesting. I mean, the Diaz fight ended in quite interesting fashion, obviously not the best for Edwards, but then also, of course, the Usman fight, with the first one ending in such dramatic of a stoppage. The second one and the Covington one, on paper perhaps aren't the most entertaining of fights, but just in general, excellent fight IQ showing, and like I say, an underrated champion, which, like I say, probably doesn't get that recognition because on paper his fights perhaps aren't always the most interesting, but something he does really well. He disguises his shots excellently. I saw Aspinall in a video with TNT Sports on their Instagram kind of break down the first fight between Edwards and Muhammad, and just, obviously it didn't go on for too long, but saw highlighted some of the disguising head kicks in which Muhammad Edwards does so well, and he did it against Usman as well, of course, and he's just really, really excellent with his kick variety. And Muhammad is also somebody who's very good with his kicks, but I think they aren't quite as disguised as that of Edwards is, and perhaps they maybe not timed quite as well. Perhaps they're just thrown out a bit more aggressively. But in general, I think Edwards has the more variety going up and down. He'll break down the leg and then also go to the head, where Muhammad perhaps might just go to the head a bit more or to the body a bit more with them. But in general, yeah, striking matchup is going to be excellent. Of course, he has the accuracy, the timing. Edwards, he has great, like I say, striking variety in general. He's very disciplined and composed. He just always looks like nothing ever phases him when he's in there, and when you have to deal with the amount of things that a UFC fighter has to deal with, and it's not like boxing, you have to always be prepared for the takedown as well, and he just always looks comfortable. He makes you question. I think earlier on his feints are really good, and like I say, because you his timing is so excellent, he does make you question things, and because he has that kind of highlight reel type knockout against Usman, where it was just such a surprise, no other opponent is going to want to have to deal with that, and so they're always wary of something like that happening, which just comes with perhaps, like I say, the luxury of him having that highlight reel knockout. He finds his range really well. He picks his shots very nicely. He typically fights at a slow pace and is good at slowing the pace down. Muhammad is the opposite, I think, in recent times in general as well, but I'm going to speak a bit more about that in a moment. He's got excellent footwork. He switches stances, like I say, similar to that of Muhammad, but I think his footwork is faster. I think he's faster in general than that of Muhammad, and I think his balance is better than that of Muhammad's. He also circles around a lot nicer than that of what Muhammad does. I think Muhammad's a bit more straight back and forth with his movements. He fights front foot. He has good front foot counters. He takes minimal damage, which, you know, it's excellent to see. A lot of UFC fighters take a lot of damage, and that really wears them down and shortens their career, to be honest. But Edwards is one of the type of people who, like I say, because of his discipline and his defensive IQ, he doesn't really take too much damage. Especially since that Diaz fight, he hasn't really taken too much since. Obviously, it looked like he was hurting that, but since then, defensively, he seemed to become stronger. He finds a flow very well. He's typically quite good at being just out of range. He's got very good takedown defense, and against Covington, who was seen to be mainly a striker, and that what he was going to do against Edwards, which he did kind of try and do a lot. Covington avoided being on the ground for a lot of the time. Obviously, there was points, but throughout most of it, the takedown defense was very strong, and in general, he's able to outbox you. Negatives about him, like I say, he's been hurt. He was hurt against the Diaz fight, and perhaps that was against, you know, a high output, aggressive type fighter. And I think in general, perhaps into the later rounds, he does seem to fade a little bit, or, you know, let other opponents get onto it into the later rounds. Against Covington as well, he put himself in a bad position into the last round, and, you know, it seems to be maybe a bit of a habit now. I think his head can be on the line a bit. But I think Mohammed has that as well. He's a slower starter than that of Mohammed, I believe. But to be fair, in their first fight, Edwards did come out quite quickly against him, but he also has that work rate to be able to fight all the rounds well. He has a weak guard. I don't think he's physically as strong as that of Mohammed. I don't necessarily know if he's as powerful. I'm not too sure. Neither of them are crazily powerful and known really for that, but I think the timing and the accuracy, you know, helps Edwards perhaps seem more powerful. He can have ground errors and, you know, lunging, giving unnecessary takedowns like he did against Covington a little bit. You know, discipline-wise, he isn't normally typically doing that, but perhaps just because Covington took him down, he wanted to do that back. But yeah, I think if he is going to go for takedowns, he's just got to make sure he times them a bit better. He can stand quite tall and be a bit of a big target. I think if he does get caught on the back foot, he's not always excellent. I think Mohammed might be a bit better on the back foot, and like I say, in the later rounds, it's interesting to see. I don't think he's strong enough physically a lot of the time to actually be able to lock in a submission and to be able to hold it there, and he does give away his back at times. Mohammed, as a fighter, though, of course, he's going to be very eager to prove. Like I've mentioned, he's been waiting around for this opportunity for a while, and now this is his huge opportunity, and I respect him fully for coming over to England to take the fight. And yeah, like I say, I feel like he's going to be more than eager to prove, and it's definitely not a fight in which Edwards should be overlooking at all. He has good footwork as well, like I say, switch stancer, perhaps a bit slower, perhaps, like I say, going back and forth a little bit with his movements, but he still has good footwork. He's, like I say, a fellow striker. He's always moving though, and kind of slows down you from being able to set up shots, and that could be really interesting because Edwards, who, like I say, wants to have a slow pace, could perhaps struggle with slowing Mohammed down and being able to time them shots onto him. He, like I say, is the more physical out of the two. He has solid takedown defense as well, so I don't necessarily believe this is a fight which is going to go to the ground at all. If it does, maybe a small amount. He has high but also strong kicks. He has good straight shots and a good jab as well. He's quite explosive with them when he wants to be. He can fight on the front or the back foot. He's got good pressure, and I think that pressure's since, you know, joining with Khabib. I don't necessarily know if he is, but in his last fight he was had Khabib in the corner. I think his pressure and his output has increased a lot, and that's made him a better fighter in general. He has a good chin. He's definitely able to take good shots. He lets his hands go. Fights at typically quite a high pace, which is that of contrasting typically, in my opinion, to that of Edwards. He beats you up and he has a good work rate. Negatives about him, like I said, inactivity could play into a factor most definitely, and with the age as well. He's slower, I think. I believe he lunges in, but with his striking, more than that of Edwards, who's very crisp and sharp with his striking. He backs, like I say, in straight lines. He can rush in. He is flatter footed. His reflexes, I don't think, are as sharp. His power, like I say, isn't anything too crazy. His head can be on the line. He can leave his punches out and in range and then be there to be countered. He rushes in, like I mentioned, stands straight on. Cutting off the cage isn't always his strongest part, even with the pressure that he does kind of deliver. He can fall for traps, like I've also mentioned as well. Edwards sets them traps lovely. He's less willing to go to the ground, I believed, in that of Edwards. So if Edwards is going to take him to the ground, it could be interesting to see how that plays out. Edwards is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Edwards will win via TKO in round 4. Yeah, it would be a big statement. Going for the two British guys in the British UFC card, perhaps that's biased, but I believe that Edwards is the technically smarter fighter out of the two. I don't think he's going to put himself in as vulnerable of positions. He might have to weather a storm every so often from that of Muhammad. But I believe if Muhammad is rushing in, even though he is constantly moving, I think if he does rush in, Edwards could time him with a shot and then be able to follow up upon that shot and then be able to get a stoppage into the later rounds. I don't believe it's going to be like a brutal like first round, one punch KO where he goes flat out or anything like that. I think he's definitely going to have to follow up on it. But I think like I say, his timing is just so excellent. He could definitely set up a shot like that. Then we could go on to fight. It's interesting. I'm not really too sure. I think the welterweight division was not too long ago in a really good position. But now it's, I think, weakened out a little bit, and with the likes of Chimaev not really coming through in that aspect anymore, wanting to be at middleweight, he's got the likes of Rakimov, Ian Gary as two options. I don't think Ian Gary's quite there yet. He wants to fight Rakimov. Will Rakimov probably get a title shot? Wouldn't surprise me. If he does go on to fight Ian Gary Rakimov, then Della Maddalena is probably the only realistic option. I don't think Usman, who is still the top contender, is worthy of a title shot after coming off 3 losses. Makhachev, if Edwards wants to move up and fight Makhachev, then you never know, perhaps that could happen. I'm sure Makhachev wouldn't really be against it, but a lot of fighters moving up and down weights to become 2-weight world champions. I don't necessarily know if Edwards wants to do the same as well, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like if you did, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.